Hello, you are tuned into Premier Gospel Music for Life, and this is Awkward, the show that gives honest answers to awkward questions. My name is Lucy, and I'll be here with you till 7 p.m. Not only do I have a great playlist for you, but I'm also joined in the studio by two very special guests. But before I introduce them, let's recap on last week's episode, which was called Online Valentine, where we talked about the good, bad and ugly stories of online dating. This week's episode is called Missionary Position, and it's part 2 of our series on love. How do we as Christian youth workers chat to young people about sex and relationships? Is it in lust we trust, or is love more than just a feeling? Let's find out more. Let me introduce you to my special guests from Romance Academy. Hello, Jason and Sarah.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, how are you guys?
Very well, thank you.
Brilliant. You come all the way from sunny Luton.
Yes, the truth lives there in Luton.
Brilliant. So tell me more about Romance Academy. Is that like a Hogwarts for all things on love? What's that?
Well, we do sound a bit like a dating agency, but we are not. We are a sex and relationship education organisation.
Okay, tell us more. What does your job involve, Sarah? What do you do?
So it involves a lot of driving around the country, talking to young people, talking to parents, youth workers, church leaders, teachers about issues around sex and relationships, and how together we can actually start to build more healthy relationships for young people across this country.
That's fantastic. And tell us more about what you guys been up to recently.
Well, we've been training in London. We did a training day last month. We've been doing lots of speaking at different churches, helping parents to engage with the issue of pornography and helping their young people to stay safe online.
That's brilliant.
Well, we wrote a bit about whether the one exists, whether that's a concept that Christians actually believe in or should believe in, and try to challenge some of the ideals and ideas that we have about relationships and marriage.
Yeah, so we've been doing quite a lot of research into this because it's a question we get asked quite a lot. So we've done some research into where the idea actually came from, because I think all of us have grown up with Disney, we've grown up with movies and with TV that all kind of circulate around this idea of finding that one perfect person for you. And when we did some research, we actually found out the origin of this isn't Christianity, it's not the Bible, it's not stuff that we've inherited from religion, it's actually Plato.
Wow.
So Plato originally came up with this idea that we were all created as kind of round beings, and God looked at us and he was a little bit worried that we were getting out of control and too powerful, and so he split every being in half. So you got half a soul in one, half a soul in the other, and then there became this like mad quest throughout life to be reunited with the other half of your being. And so there's this idea that there's this one person outside in the world who can complete you, and if you're reunited with them, then you're back to how you were made to be. And we've inherited a lot of this idea into our culture and even into the church, and we've got this mad quest to try and find something that actually we don't actually think really exists.
That's very, very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing about the Plato story. I have never heard that before. If you want to find out more about what Sarah and Jason have written about the myth of the one, log on to fresh-thoughts.co.uk and tweet us at Premier Gospel. Let us know what you think. So, Jason, tell us more about the one. Do you get that question a million times every workshop you do, or do you get more awkward questions?
Well, we get a lot of awkward questions. We always give young people and parents the chance to ask us any question they have about sex and relationships. So we pretty much have seen it all. In terms of the one, I guess that is something that within church is quite common for people to be looking for. Is there the one out there? We hear stuff in sermons and talks about kind of waiting for that person that God has for you, and just pray until the person that God has created just for you to come along. And so people are kind of wrestling with this idea of, well, what if I can't find that person, or what if that person doesn't find me, or what if they've married someone else, or you have these kind of ideas that can mess with our heads on this whole issue. If we believe that there's only one person out there who God has created for us, and that really kind of narrows down our options and makes it really difficult for us to actually find someone to spend the rest of our lives with, because what if we picked the wrong person? And so we try to talk about those kind of issues that people are struggling with and recognize that that is a really difficult issue. I think what Sarah and I unpack in the article is that actually something that we find in scripture? Is that something that is a Christian idea? And I guess our suggestion is that no, it's not something that we find in the Bible. But there is some stuff in there that God has to say about relationships, and so we wanted to kind of focus on some of that stuff instead.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much again for writing the article and coming in the studio to talk with us till 7 o'clock about love, sex and relationships. So if you're listening, tweet me at Premier Gospel. You can go on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Premier Gospel, or you can text me, first word gospel and your message to 66777. That's 66777. Let me know, do you think there is such thing as the one? Or maybe you have found someone and you're not sure if they are the one. Let us know. Here's how you can get in contact.
Call 020 7316 0101. Text gospel to 66777 or tweet at Premier Gospel.
Well, stay tuned. This is Awkward with me, Lucy Maskell, here with you till 7. Today we're talking about relationships, sex, love, all the awkward questions that we as youth workers want to know. So, hello, Jason and Sarah again.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, you guys are from Romance Academy. Thank you so much for coming in. So we've had a lot of comments about our question, which was, do you think there is such thing as the one? How do you know? Etc. We've had an interesting Facebook comment, haven't we, guys?
Yeah.
We have. So we have a comment from Becky. Shout out to Becky if you're listening. She has said, I'll read out the full comment. It says, we had a man speak at a guys talk at our CU weekend away last year. He told the story of how he met his wife, which pretty much goes like this. She had been going out with another Christian man for a year, but when I saw her, I knew she would be my wife. So I got to know her and flirted with her with the aim of breaking up their relationship. Long story short, it all went to plan, and they have now been happily married for I don't know how long. Because he was a speaker at this talk, you think that he had some kind of authority to say what he did. But people are pretty perplexed over what and how he did what he did and his motivations. It was pretty funny, but also pretty controversial. What's your take on trying to steal someone else's girlfriend, boyfriend? Come on, what do you think?
It's not a great way to make friends.
Really? Are you sure?
I think one thing I'd say, like, God's grace can do amazing things. So, like, a rubbish situation he can bring good out of, but that doesn't mean we chase unhealthy situations. And I think the Bible's pretty clear about how we're meant to act with integrity and love for those around us. So I'm not sure that setting out with the aim of breaking up a couple is a great shout, really.
Jason, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, especially the whole thing about God. I'm pretty skeptical about God ever telling people that they should marry a certain person. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm sure that it could happen. I'm sure that it does happen, but I'm pretty skeptical about it happening a lot of the times, because a lot of the time I think it's just someone saying, I really, really want to marry you, and I hope that God's going to help me, because that's the only way it's going to happen. And so, yeah, and I think we just have to be really careful when we speak stuff into other people's lives, and especially saying that God told you something. If God really told you, I'm sure that he'll tell them as well. So,
well, thank you very much for your wisdom, guys. Like I said, if you've got any more comments, tweet me, text me, but we're going to be here right back after the break.
Awkward with Lucy Maskell, sponsored by Urban Saints. Changing the future, one life at a time. Honest answers to awkward questions with Lucy Maskell, sponsored by Urban Saints.
You are listening to Premier Gospel Music for Life. This is yours truly, Lucy Maskell, here with you till 7 p.m. This is Awkward, honest answers to awkward questions. And today I am happy to have my special guests, Jason and Sarah, in the studio. Hello, Jason and Sarah.
hey.
Hello. Thank you very much for coming into the studio. I have a question for you. What do you think about all the texts and the tweets that we've had in about our question, is there such thing as a one? And the story we had before the break. What's your view on that?
Interesting. think a lot of what Jason said was spot on. I've had a couple of friends who've had people come up to them and say, like, God's told me we're going to get married, and really it's not been what they've heard. I actually had a friend who grew some really dodgy facial hair because it was happening to him so often, and called it the woman repeller. So I think there's a lot of stuff here we've got to be really careful with.
Definitely. Gotta be very careful, especially, if you're going to that length of growing a beard to repel people. That's quite serious, isn't it? Anyway, I have got some comments in from Facebook, Twitter and text, so thank you to everyone who sent them in. Ben said, when you put a ring on their finger and promise them to be the one, yes, there is such thing as the one. Michelle said, no, I don't believe God has one perfect person for each of us. I think he desires us to find someone who makes us happy, can support us on our wavelength, and whose vision for life complements their own. Emily also tweeted in and said, I think you can have the one. The danger is when society and life make you change and the person you married changes into someone you wouldn't have married. And then finally on the Facebook, Kate said, I remember being weirdly drawn to my husband, who I'm married to now, and then meeting him thinking, I don't know what it is, there's just something different about him. So from a spiritual perspective, when it's the right person, it feels completely different to any other person you've met before or been attracted to. It's almost like God's giving you a hint. Thoughts, guys?
Man, there's a lot of stuff there. A whole host of things. I think for one thing, you've got to bear in mind that people think and respond differently to situations. So some people are massive intuition people. That's how they make the decisions. They really feel intuitive about stuff that they come across. And for other people, they're much more logic-based, much more thought-based. And I suspect you would find a difference in how people make a decision about a spouse, a little bit depending on whether they're intuition people or whether they're logic people. And actually, when we talk about this idea of just feeling like it's the one, that actually excludes a lot of people who don't make their decisions in those ways.
Wow, that's really good wisdom. That, like you said, everyone's different. Just because you think, oh, God's told me this, doesn't mean he actually has. You have to think logically, or maybe God has told you, but you're only going on your logic. So that's very true, isn't it? So I was going to say, Jason, what are your thoughts as well on this?
Yeah, I think, well, with the one that Sarah was just talking about there, I think there's a bunch of stuff that we have to use all of our person and all that we are to make a really important life decision, like the person we're going to spend the rest of our lives with. And so I think it's absolutely okay for us to bring God into it. And I think as people of faith, we should be praying about the person that we eventually end up marrying. But we also need to use our brains and think about, how that's going to work practically. I reviewed a book on Loretta's show last week or a week before about marriage, and that went through all of the different aspects of marriage and things you might face together, and you got a chance to do that with the person that you were thinking about marrying. So I think there's that aspect to it as well. And then, love and marriage, it should be a thing of joy. It should be something that engages our emotions. And so if it doesn't feel good, and if it's not something you're excited by about sharing life with that person, then that should be a red flag, or at least a yellow
Alarm
one
bells.
to say,
Yeah.
You'd like to think that's going to feel good and be an enjoyable thing, and there's going to be tough times, but you want it to at least be fun and enjoyable at the start.
But
Absolutely.
I think as well as that, like, there was some stuff in there about finding the person that makes you feel good and all this sort of stuff. I think sometimes we've absorbed a little bit of the consumerism of our culture that says our relationship is about how we feel in it, and the validity of the relationship is about how we feel and what they do for us. And actually, that's totally different to what Jesus says about love. Jesus says it's about sacrifice. It's about giving up stuff for other people. And that doesn't mean that we don't enjoy being in a relationship with them, but actually our primary goal is not our own satisfaction. And I think when it talks about people changing, sometimes like life and culture will change the person you're with. I think I say that's not an if, that's a when. Like, I guarantee you the person you're married to will change, and you will change. And actually, I think I'd go as far as to guarantee that there will be days that you don't necessarily want to be married to that person anymore.
Wow.
But that's why we talk about love being a decision and a commitment, not an emotional feeling. And actually, when you choose to marry someone, that idea if they become the one then, I'm okay with that, because you've chosen them and you're going to commit to them. And that means when it's tough, when they've changed and you don't know them, actually you're committed to getting to know them and falling in love with them again. And I think those are the kind of mindsets that mean marriage lasts, rather than becomes something that we just want out of.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much for your wisdom there. But whoa, hold your horses with the marriage thing. Oh, this is a youth show. Not sure we're talking about marriage yet. But we are talking about the other awkward questions to do with to love and sex. So let me ask you another question. Let's get down to nitty-gritty. Why is it that lots of Christians have this big deal about saving sex for marriage? Because I have some friends who are like, yeah, it's fine, you don't have to get married, do what you want. And I've got other friends who are like, no, we must put a ring on it. So what's your opinion on that?
What's the question specifically around?
About saving sex for marriage. Why do Christians make such a big deal about saving it? Like, not everybody does, but most Christians do.
I think it's a great question, and one of the... We use a passage in Matthew 19 to kind of unpack this idea and to try and look at why do Christians think that marriage is a really safe context for sex. Why? Probably actually as a community of Christians we would say that marriage is the best context for sex. Why do we say that? Well, I think the clue is here in Matthew chapter 9 when Jesus says, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they're no longer two but one. And I think the idea there is of two people being joined together in physical union, but also emotionally, spiritually, physically, in socially. They're joined together in every way. And so Christians believe that sex is powerful. It's powerful enough to join two people together. And so we need a context which is safe for that to happen. Because if we believe that sex is powerful, then we should treat it with respect. It's something which has great power. And so we need a context of faithfulness and commitment, a context of love, a context of safety for that. And that's what we call marriage. And I think it's that way around. Marriage exists because we believe that sex is powerful enough to join two people together. It's not the only reason, but I think it's one of the really key ones.
Okay, Sarah, any thoughts from you?
I'm in agreement. I get the conversation. I think actually the conversation is happening inside the church as well as outside the church. So a lot of the time people kind of assume that Christians are set on this no sex before marriage thing. And actually we need to have more conversations in the church about it because people aren't sure. They want to talk about it. And actually it's not easy. Like, it's a high bar. It's a high calling. So I'm 25 now. It's been over a decade since it was first talked to me about. And a decade's a long time. And actually when we're saying this to young people, we've got to recognise, we're calling you to something that is challenging. We're calling you to an ideal that's going to be with you for a while. But Jesus talked about it, and Jesus seemed to think it was worth it, and Jesus seemed to think that there's something about marriage, there's something about this intimacy of sex, there's something about this intimacy of this one relationship you get to have with this one person that is worth the time you put into getting there. So I think we need to be having a lot more conversations around it.
I absolutely agree with you. I think we do, as a church, need to talk more about sex, relationships, love, whether it's with young people or older people, no matter what age. I think sex is quite a taboo, but then I think actually God created sex, so we should be the people talking about the most in a way that is helpful for people, in a way that gives complete honesty and openness so people can be themselves.
Absolutely.
I've actually got a text in. I want to know what you guys think of this. So Carl from Doncaster has texted in saying, so when it comes to the whole saving sex and marriage thing you Christians have got, I think you're all just the biggest bunch of virgins. You're so repressed. It makes Richard Branson look like he's gone out of business. So what do you guys think of that?
Do you know what? Bunch of virgins is, that's quite accurate. I'm okay with that description because that kind of is the technical term. But it depends whether you find that an insult.
Jesus was a virgin, right?
Yeah, I'm okay with that, yeah.
Okay, what do you think, Jason, about that comment I just got?
Well, I think it's an interesting take on a Christian viewpoint around sex and relationships. I think that to see our respect of sex as repression, I think is to misunderstand what we believe about sex. I think, as I was just saying there, about Christians believe that sex is incredibly powerful. I come across people in my daily work who say to me that sex is just a physical act. It doesn't have anything to do with our emotions. It doesn't have anything to do with our spirit, the spiritual side of us as human beings. It's purely a physical act. If sex is purely a physical act, then Christians are repressed, and Christians do need to chill out. However, what if there's more to sex than that? I think psychologists would tell us that there's more to sex than purely a physical act. It affects our emotions. It affects who we are as people. We're shaped by our experiences. And so I think to say that sex is purely a physical act doesn't really match up to what we know about psychology and our development as human beings. And so I think if we say that there's more to sex than that, then actually it's something that we need to treat with respect, and Christians are striving to do that, and that's something that we want to do. Now, people without faith may look at us and say we've gone too far, and I think, as Sarah said, like, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that critique, because I know why I hold to the values that I do, and I realise that not everyone will share those values. But for me, I do what I do and live how I live because I believe that sex is powerful enough to join me to another person. And so the context in which I have sex is really important. And for me, I think the best context for that is marriage.
I think also, like, repression's a strong word, and repression is bigger than sex, and joy is bigger than sex. And actually, do you know what? I've got a lot of friends who aren't Christian, and I fundamentally do not believe that their word for me and how I interact with them is repressed, because life is bigger than sex, and fun and joy and enjoyment and partying and all that stuff. That's bigger than whether or not you're having sex, and you can actually enjoy life and not have sex. It is possible. Female ferrets, if they don't have sex for a year, they die. Human beings are not female ferrets.
You heard it here first,
we can
guys.
live through this.
Female ferrets die if they don't have sex.
That's according to the QI book. So
okay.
I claim no authorship of that fact, but I've read it.
Well, thank you, God, that we haven't died if we haven't had sex, because I think a lot of the population would be killed off. That would be quite awkward. So I was going to ask you guys, what happens if a Christian comes up to you who is having sex outside of marriage, as you say, and they're like, why are you so judgmental? Like, you know, I feel so condemned. Why do you guys say I can't have sex outside marriage? You know, like, what's wrong with that? Like, what happens if I'm stranded on a desert island with my boyfriend or girlfriend and we just can't hold it? What would you say?
Well, first thing I'd say is try and get off the desert island. But I'd also, if people felt judged by things that I had said, the first thing I'd want to say is I'm sorry, because absolutely would not want people to feel judged, and that would be the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say is I'm saying what I'm saying because of what I believe about sex, and I'm not in a position to judge anyone else's lifestyle or say that I'm better than them or that my choices are better than them. Anyone who has been in a relationship of any kind has made mistakes, and so I think we have this word in Christianity called grace, and it's about second chances, and it's about the fact that our mistakes don't define who we are, and they might have been in our past, but they don't define our future. And so I don't think we have a right to sit in judgment on anyone else. However, I'd go back to what I said before about my beliefs about sex come from my beliefs about sex. I believe that sex is a powerful thing. I believe that it's something which is really important in a couple's relationship, and so it should be treated with great care. But I realise that many people have had sex outside of marriage, and that's not to say that they're bad people, or again, I don't have a right to judge them, but I would say, is sex powerful, or is sex not powerful?
Definitely. Well, thank you very much, guys, for those thoughts. We'll be back after a few songs, but in the meantime, let me know, if you're listening out there, what you think. Do you think Jason and Sarah are just being repressed virgins like the text I got, or do you think they're telling the truth? Let us know. Call me on 0207 316 0101, tweet at Premier Gospel, Facebook me on the Premier Gospel page, or text me with your first word gospel and your message to 66777. Is sex outside of marriage wrong, or is it something that we should do all the time?
Awkward with Lucy Maskell, sponsored by Urban Saints. Changing the future, one life at a time.
You are listening to Premier Gospel Music for Life, and this is Lucy Maskell here with you till 7 o'clock. Today we have lots of very great topics to talk about. I have my special guests Jason and Sarah from Romance Academy. I've been chatting about why do Christians sometimes say why sex before marriage is wrong, or is there such thing as the one, and how come in church people don't talk about sex when a lot of people want to talk about it. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who's texted in, tweeted in. It's great to hear your thoughts. We're going to be reading out some in a bit. But welcome back to the show, Jason and Sarah. Thank you so much for your comments and your wisdom. So right now, I want to ask you guys another question about the whole talking sex in church. Why do Christians, especially youth workers, maybe not talk about sex enough?
Well, this is a show I know a lot of youth workers are listening in, and I had a conversation with a youth worker a couple of months back, and he said to me, I wanted to talk to my young people about sex and relationships, and so he said that him and his fiance they'd got married and then they'd gone away on their honeymoon. Came back from their honeymoon, and all the kids in the youth group are like, what happened? Did you have lots of sex? And what was it like? And because him and his wife had saved themselves for marriage, they hadn't had sex before marriage, and so he said, respectfully and obeying the right kind of wisdom around, like, how, not oversharing. He talked about some of the stuff that he'd found, and his experiences of saving sex for marriage. And his pastor heard about this and dragged him completely over the coals because he talked to his young people about sex. Here's the thing: when I work with young people, what I find is that they know more about Russell Brand's sex life, the stuff about 3 or 4 girls in a bed at the same time. They know more about that than the kind of sex that we want them to have, which as Christians we say to young people, save sex for marriage. Well, why don't we talk about that kind of sex? How are they going to know what that is? Now, we're not necessarily talking about going into details, but if we want young people to be able to repeat something, they need to be able to know what it is they're trying to repeat. And so let's start talking about what sex within marriage is like. Let's start talking about how to have a healthy sex life within a marriage. And we don't have to wait until people are married to do that. We can talk about that stuff, because young people are hearing all the time in the media about all different kinds of sex. They hear a lot about unfaithfulness, they hear about abusive sex, they hear about all this kind of stuff. But how many times do we hear about the kind of sex between two people who are married, who love each other, who are trying to strive to build a relationship that lasts for life? How many times do we hear that kind of sex talked about? Well, in my experience, not very often. And so when as youth workers, I hear about people who are trying to have that conversation and just not being well received, that's when I realised, well, there's why people don't talk about it, because it's not well received. And I think there's a real challenge to us in the church that if we want to, we talk about love all the time because we want people to be loving. If we want marriages to be healthy and long-lasting, then we need to talk about what that looks like and help people to unpack it for themselves and prepare them for the day when hopefully they get to experience that for themselves. So I think something really important, a conversation that must be had.
Thank you very much. Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think sometimes we're not intentional enough about having this conversation. So I know that when I was a youth worker, like it's crazy busy. There's loads of stuff you want to talk about, and there's loads of stuff you've got to get done. And actually, talking about sex and relationships is a little bit uncomfortable. Sometimes you don't fully know how to do it well, and so you kind of push it down the to-do list. And before you know it, it's been a year, it's been a year and a half, it's been 2 years, and you actually haven't mentioned it. And I think we just need to be intentional about saying this is important. Our young people are talking about this stuff. Our young people are trying to figure it out, they're trying to figure out, what do I believe, how do I want to live my life, and we're opting out of that conversation. We're saying we're too busy to get involved, and actually we want to be there to support them. And that doesn't mean making them do what we think they should do, but it does mean being present to help them navigate that well. And I think if we have to prioritise that in how we plan.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much, guys. We are going to be back after the break. But in the meantime, let me know what you think. Should we talk about sex more in church? Or do you think we talk about it too much? Let me know.
Call 020 7316 0101. Text gospel to 66777 or tweet at Premier Gospel.
You are listening to Awkward, honest answers to awkward questions, and this is Lucy Maskell here with you till 7. Bye. Wow, I can't believe we've had like an hour that has gone. I have Romance Academy in, Jason and Sarah, who've been chatting to me about why do Christians avoid talking about sex, and how as youth workers can we chat about it more and be open. So guys, my next question for you is this: what happens if you are in love with someone who isn't a Christian, whether they don't believe in God or they're of a different faith? What are your views on that?
I'd say that's a real tricky situation. Wow, how do you deal with that one? I think the obvious answer is very, very carefully, because I think there's a lot of thinking that needs to happen around that relationship for that person. I have to be honest and say that I've seen Christian friends of mine marry non-Christians, and it hasn't necessarily turned out as badly as people thought it would. You know, I remember when I was sort of 14, 15, we were almost told, like, if you marry a non-Christian, the whole world is gonna collapse around your ears and everything's gonna go wrong. And I don't think that is very honest, because that doesn't.
It's not very helpful, is it, Jason? Either.
No, and
especially the world hasn't ended. It would have ended ages ago, right? Anyway,
I definitely don't think it's a good idea. Here's the way I would approach it, rather than sort of saying about specific situations, because I think that's really difficult. What I would be wanting to do is to say, what is the best kind of person for me to build a relationship with? And if my values as a Christian are really important to me, if my faith is an important part of my life, I want someone who I can share that with. I want someone who I can grow in that with together. And so when I'm choosing a partner, that's something which for me is a non-negotiable, but it's not for everyone, and I can't impose my values on them. I can't live someone else's life. And I think pastorally, you end up alienating yourself from people by trying to say to them, well, this is what I think is best. You have to live this way. And I think if you're a youth worker, that's absolutely not the way to approach it. The way I would approach it as a youth worker is to have maybe a conversation with that person or with the group saying, okay, so what is important about sharing values when we're in a relationship? Why is that important? What are the possible sticking points? What are the possible challenges to that relationship where you've got completely different ideas? I dated someone in the past who was a Christian, but who didn't really want to be going to church every week. That wasn't that important to them. And that was a good sign to me of that someone who would not be the right person for me, because that's an important part of my life.
Awkward,
and it always has
moment
been.
Of the week.
This is very awkward. Carry on, Jason.
That was the moment of the week.
Right there, that was the awkward moment.
Apparently what I just said was the moment of the week.
It just happened. You heard it here.
So yeah, it was. Yeah, and it was quite awkward, to be fair, to find that I didn't share those values with the person that I was dating. And so I think it's something that people have to make that decision for themselves. And as a youth worker, we know we cannot change anyone else. You know, they can only change themselves, and they have to live their own life. We can't force people to do stuff. So it's about helping them to think about what is wise, what is sensible, and what kind of things should we be thinking about when we're dating someone. And I'm sure Sarah will have some thoughts to add to that.
Yeah, Sarah, I was going to say, so let's say someone has a boyfriend who is atheist and just like, I don't get the whole God thing, and you want to go out with them and you're a Christian girl. What are your views on that?
I mean, if you've reached the point where they're a boyfriend, it's a different conversation. Like, there's conversations you can have when someone's talking about the issue in hypotheticals. There's conversations you can have when they've met someone they like, and then there's another set of conversations you have when they're dating someone, because actually that's a different ballgame. Like, this is a human being that they relate to and they care about. But I think I'd be wanting to help them think through some of the challenges. I wouldn't be asking questions to get them to think about stuff they're going to have to tackle before they do. So kind of, in my time I've dated some Christians and I've dated some non-Christians, and there's some lessons that I learned through that that I'd want to have in the back of my mind for what kind of questions do I wish someone had asked me, what kind of things do I wish they'd said, hey, have you thought about this? And I think one of the big challenges for a young person dating a non-Christian, if this young person has decided that not having sex until marriage is important to them, I think they need to be thinking and having conversations with the person they're dating about, like, how do you feel about this? What's your opinion on this? Because actually it's a big ask of someone you're dating. If for them it's an important part of a relationship and you're saying no, that's a big challenge for you guys to talk about. And actually reality is, like, sex is enjoyable. People want to have sex. So if you're dating someone, it's going to be a difficult thing not to do anyway. And if one half of the partnership wants to and the other half doesn't, that's challenging. And there's difficult decisions you've got to make. And I think I'd be wanting to say to the young person, how are you talking about this? Are you interacting with each other on this issue? Have you got support? Have you communicated on this? And I think it's all about keeping the dialogue open. I don't want to crack down on any young person's relationship and tell them you must break up with so-and-so, because I don't think that's my role. But I think I want to be saying, I'm here for you to talk to, no matter what happens, no matter what decisions you make. I want to be here to be a sounding board and to help you to make wise decisions to build a healthy relationship.
Great words, Sarah. I was going to say, some of my friends who I've talked to about this before the show, who are Christian, they've quoted to me a Bible passage. You probably heard this quite familiar. They said it's from 2 Corinthians chapter 6, 14 onwards. So I've written it down just from what people told me. It says, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? What harmony is there between Christ and Belial?" I think that's a Greek word for another god. "What does a believer have in common with an unbeliever?" So they've said to me, you don't want to be unequally yoked to someone who doesn't believe in Jesus. What would you say to that passage?
I mean, I think there's some wisdom in it. I think it picks up on some stuff about you've got different values. That's going to be a challenge to walk with. I mean, I think one thing I'd say is I'm pretty sure that the context of the original passage is actually about business. And I'd love to ask those people whether they make the same decision about where they work and the businesses that they start as they are about this. I think that's a challenging question about context and how they're using that Bible verse.
Nice.
But I think there is some wisdom about saying our values are different. How does that affect us? And I think Jason's already said that doesn't have to happen in terms of Christian, non-Christian. It can happen in terms of Christian. And a lot of the preparation and thinking you've got to do in your relationship is going to be about, what are our values and do they work?
Definitely. You keep talking a lot about values. I mean, what happens when you do collide as a couple? Let's say a young person is going out with someone who just thinks, no, sex while married is fine, but that person says, you know what, I want to save myself, but I don't know, I feel pressured. What would you say?
Well,
Jason?
I think that's about respect between the two people that are in the relationship, and you kind of need to talk about that stuff. I mean, one of the things that we often talk about with young people is you should never feel pressured to do something that you don't want to do in a relationship. And so young people need to think about, any of us would need to think about what's going on in that relationship. If I'm being forced or feeling pressured to do something that I don't want to do, that's gonna say to me that that's not a great relationship. That's not a healthy relationship. For someone to try and pressure you to do something that you don't want to do. So I think that would be a conversation I'd be wanting to have with a young person, to say, think about this, because young people they often tell us, when we say to them, you don't have to have sex, that's often news to them.
Really?
Strange.
Newsflash, everyone, you don't have to have sex.
Yeah, you don't have to have sex. And so for young people to hear that can often be quite freeing. And then at the end of the day, people make their own decisions when they're alone with their boyfriend or girlfriend. The decisions that they make in those moments are the ones that they really want to make. That's what I would want to be the case, and not someone doing something because someone's pressured them. And also, how can we help young people of faith who want to live out their beliefs? How can we help them to live out what they believe? So if they believe that they want to save sex for marriage, how can we help them to do that, knowing that we can't make those decisions for them?
Definitely.
And I think, so we do some work in our romance academies where we basically kind of get young people to think around how can you express care and love and affection to another person without using sex, because quite often all we've equipped young people with is that the way you communicate your love and affection is through sexual interaction. And actually I can totally understand why young people would want to have sex. I can understand why and actually when the other person in that relationship is saying that they want to have sex, that's not because they have this horrible desire to drag our young person into disrepute. That's not what's going on. They care about them, they're attracted to them, and they want to express that. And actually those are all great things, and sometimes it's about giving young people the tools to express that in ways that aren't sexual. And for that relationship, that might actually be really helpful.
Yeah, we do some stuff in our Romance Academy training about love languages, and we talk to young people. We help them to work out what their love language is, and also to be able to recognize other people's love languages. And that can be a great way for them to explore other ways of showing care, not just to people that they might be in a romantic relationship with, but people in their lives. Because actually one of the things that we often kind of say to young people is that we're about relational health in all of our relationships. Because actually, if I don't know how to build a healthy friendship, if I don't know how to build a healthy relationship with my parents or my brothers and sisters or the people that I live on the same street as, how am I going to be able to form a healthy relationship with someone who's in my face all the time, who's a big part of my life, who I see at really difficult times as well as really great times, who sees me after my football team have just been beaten 1-0 by Norwich.
I can feel the really awkwardness there. The
a lot of pain.
football's on.
There's a lot of pain.
If you listen
PG
back on the
awkward,
podcast,
hashtag.
yeah, hashtag PG awkward. Jason's a bit annoyed about the football. But anyway, we'll move back to our love and sex relationships topic. So with the romance academies that you do, how do you equip youth workers? You have like workshops, don't you? You go around the country doing that?
Yes, we train youth workers to run a 14-week program that can be used with young people to help them to reflect on their own values, to learn about what healthy relationships look like, how they can build and sustain healthy relationships for the long run. All of those materials are there for youth workers to be able to run, and we train them in the use of that material. It's a one-day training course, and youth workers can sign up to a 3-year license, which will give them all of the tools they need, keep them up to date with all the latest stuff that's going on in sex and relationships education, have access to sessions that Sarah and I are writing to address some of the latest issues, stuff at the moment like pornography and sexting, these kind of issues. How can we as youth workers respond well to that, not just with the young people who may come along to our churches, but how can we go in and make a valuable contribution in our local schools and communities? How can we have something credible and intelligent to say in those situations that will actually add to young people's lives? Because the reason why, as Christians, we're so passionate about this topic is because we care about people and we want them to have the kind of relationships that we believe God created us for. And that's what motivates us.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for chatting about the workshops. I think it's really important as youth workers that we get training for this. If you want to find out more while you're listening to the show, log on to romanceacademy.org. That's right, guys, isn't it?
Yeah.
romanceacademy.org. Find all the information you need. You can get Jason, Sarah, maybe to come speak where you are, wherever you are. They like travel quite a lot and they like to chat to you about all things love, sex and relationships. So, guys, I've got an awkward moment of the week. I know it was awkward with Jason's story, but here's another awkward moment of the week. So, I want to chat about this track, which is called Same Love by Bizzle. It's a response to Macklemore's track, Same Love, and it is very controversial. Listen to it and let me know what you think. You are listening to Premier Gospel Music for Life. This is yours truly, Lucy Maskell, here with you till 7. I can't believe how fast the show has gone. This is Awkward, honest answers to awkward questions. I have just played you our awkward moment of the week, which is a track by Bizzle, a Houston-based rapper in Texas, USA, and he has written a song in response to Macklemore's Same Love. If you haven't heard the original song, please listen to it. Let me know what you think. Tweet me at Premier Gospel. I have Jason and Sarah in the studio for Romance Academy, who've been doing great things with young people and teaching them more about sex and relationships. And as youth workers, we've been asking, how do we chat about sex? Because it is quite a taboo in the church. So Jason and Sarah, thank you for listening to the track. What do you think of this track?
I am not a big fan of the track, and I'll tell you why. Because I think for too long we've had this conversation about sexual orientation, same-sex attraction, from the point of view of two polarized positions, and I don't think that has helped anyone. Certainly for us at Romance Academy, we're all about healthy relationships, and so we want to talk to young people about how they can build healthy relationships. But I think it's probably fair to say that if you're a youth worker working with young people, you can't afford not to talk about this issue of same-sex attraction, because some of your young people will be struggling with that, will be wrestling with those issues themselves. And so we have to be honest about the fact that some young people do experience same-sex attraction, and I think that some of the stuff that comes across in this track, I mean, let's firstly say that it was written into a different culture. That the scene in the States is very different to over here, and so we should probably bear that in mind. But I don't think that this song fits particularly well with the challenges that we need to face as church. I think there's a couple of things that we really need to do as church in this country. And firstly, I think we need to apologise to the LGBT community for the way that we have made their sexuality and our approach to and our sort of theology around that. We've made that the most important thing, or certainly the thing that they've heard the loudest from us. They haven't heard love and acceptance from us, and I think that they should have.
Thank you very much, Jason. Sarah, do you agree with what Bizzle said in the song? Do you think, what's your opinion on it?
I think this is such a complicated issue, and I think at the heart of the issue are people. And I think when you write a song and you put it on YouTube, it becomes impersonal. And I think it's a conversation I would want to have with my friends who might be gay or who are asking questions about this. I don't think it's ever a question I would confidently tackle in an impersonal way. And I think that's why I'd never make a choice myself to write any kind of YouTube song on either side of the argument. I just think it's too impersonal for an issue that hits people right at the heart of who they are and how they want to live their lives.
Do you know that Bizzle, his real name is Mark Felder, so shout out to Mark if you're listening, because he just retweeted that song. Basically, he got death threats for the song. Do you think that's understandable, or do you think actually that's uncalled for too? There's a website I think he set up called letthetolerancebegin.com. So if you're listening into the show and you're on the internet, check out letthetolerancebegin.com. You can see some of the death threats that Bizzle's got. And I was quite shocked on both sides of how people have taken it in either way supporting it or against it. But what do you guys think? Do you think the death threats thing is understandable, or do you think that's too far?
Absolutely not. I could never come out in support of any kind of death threats. So of course there's no excuse or reason for that. I do think that there needs to be a dialogue between the church, the Christian community, and actually many faith communities for whom this whole issue of sexuality is so nuanced by theology. There needs to be an honest conversation between the two, and so things. I think, as Romance Academy, when we're speaking in lots of different contexts, we get asked these kind of questions that seek to polarize the debate and say, are you for us or are you against us?
Yeah, are you a homophobe?
And that is not.
Well, also Christians.
Exactly.
Christians who are asking, are you on our side or are you on their side?
Yeah.
No, there's a massive amount of polarization and a lot of emotion flying around, I think.
Yeah.
I got a great tweet. Thank you for Alice. Shout out to Alice. You're listening into Awkward. She says, OMG, so awkward. Well, I try my best. I was squirming. Bizzle was able to vocalise his opinion. I can't. This is a very complex issue. So I think I agree with what you guys said. It's a very complex issue. It's not just hey, here's a YouTube video. I watched Macklemore's video actually today before I came on the show. Very well produced actually. And I think quite a catchy song, isn't it, Sarah? It's very catchy.
Yeah, I can't help myself. I sing along every time.
Yeah.
I have it on a CD in my car. I sing along to a lot of stuff though, so that is one of my things. I sing in the car.
Sarah's music taste, everyone. No, Macklemore's same love track. It also caused a lot of controversy, didn't it, at the Grammys recently, because a lot of same-sex couples got married on stage, and there's a bit of hoo-ha with that, both support and both negative. So here are some lyrics from Macklemore's original song. Just like I said before, if you haven't listened to Macklemore's original same love song, this talk won't make much sense. So please listen to it after the show, but keep listening to what we're saying right now, because it's very important, especially if you're a youth worker and you have young people in your youth group who are struggling with sexuality. So some of the lyrics say, the right-wing conservatives think it's a decision and you can be cured with some treatment and religion, man-made rewiring of a predisposition, playing God, here we go, America the brave fear what we don't know, and God loves all his children is somehow forgotten. Thoughts, Jason?
I think that's a real challenge that the church needs to hear. From what I understand of what we know about psychology and the development of people's sexual orientation, it's not something that people choose. People have these attractions. I don't remember choosing to find women attractive. That is That's
how
my
dare you, Jason?
orientation.
How dare you find women attractive, you know?
Well, this is it, and so we're still learning in lots of different fields that are exploring this issue. We're still learning about our sexual formation and how these desires grow and are shaped and formed. And so I think to say that it's a choice is just not true. And people who have same-sex attraction will say, it's not something I chose. This is just how I am. So
I was born this way, right?
Yeah, and I think we have to accept that. In the absence of evidence to the contrary, we have to accept that what people say is true. And so I think that whole thing about love, how can we show love to people who challenge the kind of ideologies that the church has held onto for a long time? Because same-sex attraction is not a new thing, but actually it's something that in the last 50 years, maybe 100 years, we have responded to really poorly, and we haven't shown love to people who we should have shown love to. And even within the church, let's be honest, there's a whole range of opinion on how we should respond to this, and I think there's room for that kind of discussion. But as you said, this is a show for youth workers, and I think we should think about how can we support young people who are experiencing same-sex attraction. I said earlier on in the show that every time Sarah and I do a gig with young people, we always give them the chance to ask us any question they want. And a lot of the time, if we do it in a church context, those questions will be about faith and how their sexuality and faith play into each other. But a lot of questions, both in church and in schools that we work in, are around young people who are experiencing same-sex attraction. And so we need to help young people deal with that. Now, let me say this. It's actually a normal part of many people's sexual formation for that to be something which they're confused about at some point, and that can actually be a normal stage of development about young people learning who they're attracted to and what their sexuality is and how they hold it. And we talk on our training about the fact that sometimes young people can confuse intense admiration for someone of the same sex, an adult of the same sex who they're looking up to and saying, I'm going to be like that one day when I'm older, for sexual attraction. Yeah. Sometimes it can be sexual attraction, but actually for youth workers, we don't need to try and pin that down for a 13 or 14-year-old. I think what our job is to love them, to create a safe environment in which they can grow and thrive and develop, and not to feel like we have to pigeonhole people and say, you are this or you are that, or this is wrong and this is right. Helping young people to explore who they are and what their beliefs are and their values are is really important. And so that's why for us at Romance Academy, we want to talk about what do healthy relationships look like. For whatever young people are facing, they might not have any romantic relationships. It might just be their friends and family. How can they build healthy relationships which will help them when they're older to build healthy romantic relationships?
Definitely. So Sarah, what would you do then? What's the best piece of advice you give to a youth worker who's maybe listening, or maybe a young person who's listening, who struggles with sexuality and wants to talk about it with their youth group? So how much as youth workers do we reveal about ourselves? Do I say, for example, I have a Muslim boyfriend, by everybody, let's just let you know, like, how much do you say?
I think that's really challenging. I think there's a lot of wisdom in play, but we talk a lot at Romance Academy about having integrity as leaders, and actually we can't lead young people where we're not prepared to go ourselves, and that's a really high bar, and I say that without judgment, because there have been times in my life where my integrity has been lacking, and God is grace, God is good, he forgives, and he transforms and gives second chances, but I always want to be in a place where there's not stuff going on in my relationship that I'd be really uncomfortable with young people knowing about. Now, that doesn't mean I tell them the in-depth details of every fight we've just had, but it does mean that, I'm open about the fact my boyfriend and I, we have fights. I'm open about the fact my boyfriend and I, we talk about these issues, because actually there's a lot of stuff there. I want to be an example of how you navigate this stuff, and an honest example of the fact that it's challenging and it's difficult, and actually telling them, you've got to figure this stuff out and work towards it. And I want to give them this example of a relationship which is striving to be done in a godly way. So I think throwing in some of that stuff is fine, but use your wisdom about not oversharing sharing, and never share what your partner, your boyfriend, girlfriend would be uncomfortable for you to share. I think that's really important. Like, they need to be on board with this idea. You can't be telling them stuff that they're not comfortable with.
What do you think, Jason? Do you think there's a line where you can overshare and say, everybody, this is my sex life? Or do you think there is actually a chance where you say, no, this is what's going on in my life?
Yeah, and I think that's a line you're acutely aware of when you're live on radio as well.
Definitely.
I think, look, there has to be a line of appropriateness, and especially as youth workers, I think we're very aware that there's certain things that it's not appropriate for us to share with young people. But at the same time, I think within the faith community, we have quite a unique approach to youth work in that we do share parts of our lives with young people. We eat with young people in ways that youth workers in other contexts might not. We have this commitment to residentials, and we do loads and loads of time, like what I call track time with young people. We spend time in their lives. We go into their schools. We might see them in their homes and visit their parents. We might go to church with them. We might worship and share the deepest parts of our faith with those young people. And so they share our lives in a way that is sometimes quite unique.
Yeah.
But actually there does need to be boundaries, as Sarah said. But I think we have to try to navigate that well, and to think about, like I was saying earlier, how are young people going to know what good relationships look like if we don't talk to them about them? How are they going to know what, healthy sex life looks like if we don't talk to them about it? Because as far as I'm aware, I don't hear many contexts in which young people hear about healthy sex.
Welcome back to Premier Gospel Music for Life. This is Lucy Maskell on Awkward, the show that gives honest answers to awkward questions. I have to say goodbye to you, I'm afraid, but we've had a great show with Jason and Sarah from Romance Academy. We've talked from everything about what about sex before marriage? Why do Christians make a big deal out of that? What about Christians who want to talk to young people about their own love lives? Is that appropriate? And what happens if a young person in your youth group is gay? How do you minister to them? So, guys, thank you so much for coming in the studio. Any last thoughts? How can we get in contact with you guys?
I'd just say, like, any youth workers out there who want to continue this conversation, who want to throw ideas in, and if we can be of use to any youth workers, pastors, parents out there, then do get in touch with us at romanceacademy.org. We're also on Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah, and if you'd like us to come and talk to you, to your church, to the parents of your church, we've got a couple of road shows that you can book us for. We do one that's called Let's Talk About Sex, which basically aims to build confidence in parents to have the talk, or a series of talks actually with their young people. And also Let's Talk About Porn, which is a new one we're launching just because we're really aware of the impact that porn is having upon young people, and how unskilled the adults in the church feel to engage with that. So get in contact with us if you'd like us to deliver either of those things at a venue near you.